James Gardiner, the book writer for Glory Days.
Yes, he is. And I'm Nick Blaemire. I'm the composer and lyricist.
Glory Days begins performances in 10 days on the 15th of January.
Yes.
Are you guys ready?
Oh, we're ready.
Oh,
We're ready to go.
More than 5 years ready.
Oh my God. Tell our listeners what Glory Days is about, James.
Glory Days is about four best friends from high school, and they go and spend a year away at college. And after that year away at college, they come back to their old high school football field to play a prank. And, you get to see these guys together for one night in real time on a football field, kind of dealing with each other.
Yeah, it's sort of about our generation. We got a chance to sort of write a show about what it's like to be us at our age. And I think it's sort of a chance for us to write a musical for our generation, about our generation, and by our generation. But I think it sort of becomes a universal story because everybody goes through that transition from high school to college and learns who they really are sort of in that juncture of time.
Well, tell everybody how you both met.
Me and Nick both met while performing at the Musical Theater Center in Rockville. We were performing with a group called the Young Americans of Washington, which is now actually known as the Singular Sensations.
Totally. And we met, I guess, when we were 16 years old, the tender age.
Yeah.
7 years ago only.
Yes,
Yeah.
only. Don't rub it in.
So where did the idea of Glory Days begin?
Well, I had been through an experience with my three best friends from high school, in between high school and college, and where we sort of came to a juncture where we realized that we didn't work the same way that we used to, and so I wanted to start writing something about that, and I realized that there was no reason why it couldn't be a musical, because I started writing music and kind of figured that it might be an interesting way to bring pop music into a sort of a realism setting. And so I wrote a couple songs for it and did a treatment that I showed to James because I really respected his mind and the way that he writes. And I played him a song called Open Road, which is still in the show, and one of the few songs that's actually still in the show from that original draft. And I don't know, well, James, what did you do?
Well, I listened to the song, and I read through the script, and...
Which was terrible.
The script was a mess, an absolute disaster. But
oh, hey, thanks.
There was definitely an idea there, and there was kind of a glimmer that, I definitely wanted to be a part of writing it.
Okay, well, how long have you been writing Glory Days?
We've been writing it for 4.5 years.
Yeah. It's going to be our 5-year anniversary in July of this year.
Yeah, it's been 4.5 years, and we've been working on it with Eric for about 3 years of that.
Okay, well, talk about writing a show when one of you, James, lives here, and you, Nick, live in New York City. What's that been like, Nick?
Oh man, it's actually been great because we started the show together when I still lived in DC, and before we every summer we'd come home from college. I went to the University of Michigan, James went to the University of Maryland, and we would come home during the summer and write together. And then when I went to school, we'd continue to work kind of long distance. And then when I moved to New York and went out on tour, we had to start getting used to writing through email and on the phone, which is actually really freeing, I would say, because we got a chance to work in our own elements and then come together, and we would be able to say, I really like what you did here during the past month. We haven't really been talking, and then go away for another month and get a chance to revamp the things that we had talked about during the time that we were together.
But we'd send edits of the script to each other through Gmail and over iChat and stuff like that. So the internet kind of became our best friend, which seems fitting for two writers who are trying to talk about their generation. So.
Yeah, it's totally true that we are the electronic versions of Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Well, what came first, writing the melody or writing the lyrics?
Oh man, I think that actually sort of depends on each song. I would say that a lot of the time I come up with the idea for the song first, and maybe I'll find like a hook. I remember writing the song After All. I came up with the idea of when I lose my way, I see those friends of mine, and then I kind of figured out that it needed to work in a way that was going to sort of have some denial for Will about where he was in his life, and so that set up the construct for the song, and then I was able to kind of fill it in. It's always sort of like a puzzle with a song because you figure out how it's going to work, but since it's never been done before, you have to sort of look at it as a puzzle where you're making up the pieces and you can rearrange them any way you want. So it's sort of exciting in that way because even still throughout this process, we're still cutting and pasting and changing little things to make the songs work in the way that we know they can now that we've seen that the show works, and it's kind of get to see the puzzle for the first time.
So, James, did you write the book first before the songs were composed?
Well, the funny thing is that Nick had actually written a script. He had written a version of the book that he gave to me initially. So a lot of my writing came on after Nick had written that initial script, and none of it is really still in the show.
Nope.
But I was using Nick's script as kind of my guideline. So no, the story was actually in place before I really started to write the book.
But I do have to say that, Joel, one thing that is, I think, kind of undervalued in the theater is the role of the book writer, because, and we're talking about this today, because I think that, he came in with a treatment that I had, and yes, he's had to kind of glue my songs together, but that is a really hard task when, he's another entire different human being than me in a way that I think about the show, and we've had to come together on a consensus of what our story is going to be. And then, the book, while it may seem like just words because there's no real form to it that's dictated by music, it's still so important to get from one song to the other in less than 4 pages, and we have to accomplish this in this amount of time, and it's really hard. And I think that James has done an amazing job, and it's a testament to him as a book writer and how hard it is to be one, I think.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So how hard is it, James, to be a book writer?
It's hard.
Yeah, James.
It is hard, but I mean, when you're working with somebody like Nick, it's not that hard, because I it's turning into a bit of a love fest.
No, let's do it.
No, but,
Bring it. Don't just talk.
But the thing that's great about Nick is that it's not. He doesn't feel like which is the case with most musicals, that he has complete control over the piece, since it's his music and we got to make the songs work. The songs are never there in the musical just because they're pretty songs, or just because, this will be a fun idea, this is a great idea for a song. The songs are there to serve the purpose of a story. So in that sense, it's made my job a lot easier, because connecting the dots is a lot easier when the songs are there to service the story. But it's hard. It's hard, and I do agree that it's thankless at times, but it's also really fulfilling, especially for someone who loves musical theater, to be writing for the musical theater and to be able to participate and collaborate in that process, even though I can't write music and I can't write lyrics, but I can help in structuring and finding the form of a musical.
It's funny because it's the first thing to get blamed for the problems, and the last thing to get the credit. And the music, everyone's always like, "Oh, the music's great" in every single show. And when you look at Sondheim shows, John Weidman and Hugh Wheeler and these guys were really
Brilliant.
important. And so I think it's one for the book writers this time, people.
Okay. So let's talk about Eric Schaeffer. When did he get involved in Glory Days?
Oh man, Eric got involved. We were working over at the Overtures project, which is a sort of a, how do you describe it?
It's a summer musical theater institute that the Signature Theater holds over at the Kennedy Center, and we were doing a master class with Richard Maltby, and Richard Maltby is a really famous composer. He wrote Baby. He wrote
Lyrics to
Closer
Miss
Than Ever.
Saigon.
Yeah, exactly.
And directed Eight Misbehaviors.
And
Yes,
he directed
he
Eight
did.
Misbehaving.
And won the Tony.
Exactly. And Ring of Fire.
Yes, we don't talk about that one.
Ring of Fire.
Ooh,
Bum, bum,
didn't
bum.
catch on fire at the box office.
No, but Joe Calarco and Karma Camp just did one down in Texas that apparently is
Right,
catching
great.
fire. So anyway,
Good.
But not to badmouth Richard Maltby. Anyway, Richard came and did a master class, and Nick really had the
Audacity.
The audacity. I always want to say gall, but that's
Bring
just
it.
a terrible word.
It's a French place too.
Nick wanted to play the song for Richard, and Eric said of course, and Nick played After All,
Which is still in the show.
Which is still in the show also. And Richard, I remember after the song was played, Richard looked at Nick and said, "That's a perfect musical theater song. It's simple, it's heartfelt, and it tells a really beautiful story." And and because of that, because of our experience with Richard, I think, and because of what Richard said to Eric,
And what Eric, I think, got to finally see about what we were trying to do.
Once we also handed Eric a script and a demo, and he came back to us. He emailed us like a week or two later, and he goes, "Well, the script's a mess.
Well?
But there's really an amazing idea underneath it all." So.
And we didn't agree, but he fought us, and we spent the last three years with him in his living room working on the show, and sending him drafts every 8 months, and he constantly gave us encouragement and things to think about. And it is a huge reason that the show is in the place that it is now because of Eric, and we owe him a huge debt of gratitude. So thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Well, what's the best advice Eric gave you so far?
Quit. No.
No, I think the best advice Eric really gave us, and something that we also figured out just through the process, but honestly the best advice he gave us was just to be honest and to be raw. The one word that Eric constantly kind of put in our face was this idea of allowing the piece to be raw, allowing the piece to really
be a slice of life.
To be a slice of life, not to overwrite the show, not to be overly clever, but to really write for the characters and to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it's been a really nice sort of gauge for what should and should not be there as we go through, because I think both James and I, since it's our first show, want to be taken seriously and, want to be seen as actual writers. So sometimes we try to be smart in order to prove that we are, when the fact is that the story comes first, and it's not about us. It's about what these characters are going through. So it keeps dictating what should be there and what shouldn't.
And I also think the other thing that's amazing about Eric is that he, unlike most people, really trusts the process. And that goes for the way that you write a musical. That goes for what it's like in a rehearsal room. When it came to actually writing this show with Nick, he would give us suggestions and he would throw ideas at us, but he never was like, this is the way it has to be and this is the only way it can be.
Because he respected the fact that he didn't know either. And I think that we were all kind of finding the show together. And it wasn't like the blind leading the blind. It was sort of like the inspired leading the inspired.
Right.
And it was every single day you'd watch, little things change, and it would fire another idea in him, and he would go, what about this? And then we'd go, well, yeah, or what about this? And, and it's been such a joy to work with him, because he is such a creative soul, and he is so giving and willing to work with two 23-year-olds who haven't done anything, and he has this whole career that, he doesn't need us to make happen, and we certainly do need him, and we're thankful to have him.
You know what? We're in this room, and I see all these Helen Hayes Awards for Best Musical.
Yeah,
it's quite inspiring, isn't it?
A little bit.
It is.
Okay.
One day.
Okay. Let's go back and ask you, how many songs have you written for the show?
I would say we're probably in the 20s now. There's 16 songs in the show, and what I think we've been really lucky about is that a lot of the time they have worked, or at least the glimmer of the idea has worked. A lot of the time I've been going back and changing things, and so it's strange. I would say that there's 16, we've written 20 different titles of songs, but there's probably 150 different songs within those.
Totally.
Because we have the song now called Forget About It that is in the show, and that it's fast becoming one of my favorite ones to watch, because the guys are so wonderful, and it's this huge kind of rock counterpoint where they're each singing their own perspectives in harmony and crisscrossing, and it's really, really cool, and they've done a great job learning it. And it used to be my least favorite song because it didn't do anything, and we spent some time trying to figure out what it needed to accomplish. And once I realized that I just needed to be a little bit more brave and a little bit more sure that I could write something hard, that we ended up finding what it needed to be. So there's been a lot of changes, but I think they're finally ending up.
Let's talk about some of those changes. What changes have been made to the score and book since the performance at this year's Fringe Festival?
I think doing the Fringe Festival and having the audience there, and we did four performances. It was really great to have the audience there and to gauge the moments that the audience were connected and the moments that the audience disengaged. And so that was really helpful for us. But also it was helpful in a way just to kind of, like I was saying, to figure out the moments that were and were not working. Things have definitely shifted. Things have definitely changed. Lines have definitely changed. Characters' viewpoints at certain moments have definitely changed. But it's been a lot about really, the thing that the Fringe allowed us to do was realize that the structure was there. The form of the musical was there. What we had to do was go back in and really grease the wheels, because this piece is really a very delicate piece, and if one moment doesn't work, it can throw the whole thing out of whack.
But the thing that's really, I think, to its credit and to Eric's credit and the boys, is that it's really about the love between four best friends, and when the heart is there, it becomes really clear what doesn't need to be, as we were saying before. And I think it just became clear that that because we had a structure and because we had that heart still intact from that first draft that we did so long ago, it was easy to be able to say, okay, well, this song isn't working the way it should. Maybe if we change the time signature or put it in a different key or change this lyric, it's going to make it a little bit more clear and a little bit more apparent what we're trying to accomplish.
Let's talk about the opening number because it's so important in a musical. Oscar Hammerstein said that the opening number must do these things. It must set the tone for the evening first, and you have to let the audience know what to expect right away, and that you have only 20 minutes to grab your audience, and if you don't do it in the 20 minutes, you've lost them. So
True.
Talk about that opening number of Glory Days, and does it set the tone for the show, and does it tell the audience what to expect, and does it grab the audience?
I think it does do those things, and I'm glad to hear that Oscar Hammerstein. I think he might approve. I think that I didn't know that quote, and I'm sort of glad I didn't, because sometimes knowing parameters of what needs to be accomplished daunts me into a way of total paralysis. But this song that opens the show, there's sort of
called what?
Well, it's sort of a large montage. It starts with a prologue called "My Three Best Friends" that the character Will, played by Steve Booth, sings, and it's a solo. And then it goes into this huge group number called Are You Ready for Tonight?, which is sort of just as much to the audience as it is to the characters. And it's a huge counterpoint as well, where they all get to sing about what it feels like to be back on this football field that they haven't seen in a year. And after hearing Will's perspective on that before the guys get there, about how much it means to them that they're coming back, and then to actually see them all come together, you get a chance to not only set the tone for what kind of style we're going to be hearing, what the vernacular is going to be, how old these guys are, where we are, all those things get set up, and the background for why they're friends is set up. But you also get to see what to expect, because you get to see the dynamic of these four guys alone, without their parents around, just being themselves, and that is exactly what the evening is, for better or for worse, when they're happy and when they're absolutely not.
Okay, we'll talk about how many opening numbers you've written so far.
Well, I mean, the first one we ever wrote was this song called "Turn Around" that is no longer in the show. It's actually the melody is actually in the show in some of the underscoring. At least it is right now.
Yes.
But the song itself isn't in the show anymore, and that turned, because it was a very vague number. It was which I love you, Nick, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
It was ethereal.
It was a very ethereal number, and now the new one is very specific, and it really does set up tone. I don't think the first song really did. And also, "Are You Ready for Tonight" has been in the show for, I don't know, about a year and a half, maybe. But that wasn't in the original draft either. There wasn't anything that really kind of kicked the show off and really started it with a bang, which, like Oscar Hammerstein said, if you don't get them in the first 20 minutes, you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
And I think the great thing about the show right now is I think hopefully we do get them in before the first 20 minutes. We get them before,
I think that's the thing that's nice, is that in watching it, I want to pay attention to them, even though I've heard it a million times and we wrote it. And I think that was the thing that is so hard, is that if you don't if you don't connect with it, it's a mess. And I think there's one thing that has been difficult about this process for both of us, and it's been the fact that we've been learning how to write a musical at all with this musical.
Totally.
And so, in going along, we tried that opening number, and it's the only one that I'd ever written for a show ever.
Yeah.
And so once I figured out that wasn't it, it became a lot more clear what needed to be there, and it's made it a lot more helpful in finding the way to really introduce the audience to our characters and the story that we're trying to tell.
Well, let's talk about this incredible cast. Where'd you find them?
Oh, on the street.
Yeah, on the street, panhandling, singing for money. No, actually, we had auditions up in New York, which I unfortunately was not able to attend because I was in performances for Witches of Eastwick. But I totally put my trust into Eric and Nick and Matthew, and it really, for me, it wasn't that big of a deal. But I think for Nick, it was
sad
more of
for
a big
me.
deal that I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But we found that, and they're so incredibly talented, and they have amazing credits for how young they are.
Oh, yeah. They're the stars of tomorrow. I mean, these guys, they're the stars of today. But, hopefully, in a lot of ways, we're hoping that we'll be able to give them the boost that they all deserve, because they've, one of the guys was in Avenue Q. One of them was in the ill-fated Broadway run of High Fidelity, was his first Broadway show. And One of them was in Ultra Boys on the national tour with me. Actually, it's where I met him. And then one of the guys has been doing a year and a half sit-down of Forever Plaid, which is an extremely hard show.
Yeah.
And they're just so talented vocally and as people. They're so inspiring because they really, really care about the material and each other. And they're bringing these characters to life in a really honest way. And it's really cool to watch.
Okay, so let me quote Celia Wren, one of our favorite local critics, who reviewed the Fringe concert version. This is pretty good, really.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah, she wrote that audience members old enough to buy booze might find the show's central revelation that people change with time unsurprising, but yet in the hands of these actors, veterans of national tours and the like, the characters become funny and distinctive.
Well, thank you, Celia.
Yeah.
Okay, so why are Andrew Call, Stephen Booth, Adam Halpin, Jesse Johnson so successful in making their characters funny and distinctive?
I think they do such a great job because they realize that the show, like we were just saying, is a slice of life. That the show isn't the most dramatic event that's ever happened in the world. This isn't a war. This isn't, the most dramatic thing that's ever happened in the world. But the thing is that these guys do a really good job of kind of attaching themselves to the humor, and because they're so young, they understand what we're writing because they've gone through it, they've lived through it. And I think it's a piece that they honestly really care about. And I mean, they might just be telling me that, but I do think it's something.
They're good actors
care about.
if that's not true. And
exactly,
I think it's
which is what's important.
Yes, and Celia's totally right that the subject matter itself is not surprising, and it's not necessarily what we focused on either in terms of what I think is special about the show. What's special about the show is the connection between these four guys and how you hope they'll stay together. And when it gets tested, their connection gets tested, it's really hard to watch because you've come to care about them since the story's not about watching them, run across the country. It's about them sitting and talking together.
And I think that's what me and Nick were trying to do when we wrote this musical. That's what we set out to do. We were saying that musical theater and theater in general doesn't have to be the most dramatic thing that's ever happened in the world. It really can be something that's very simple and something that's very close to home. And I think that's what makes the piece different.
Totally.
And unique and special.
Okay, so which character in Glory Days is most like James and Nick, and why?
Actually, that's kind of an easy question to answer. The character that is Nick is Will, which is the Stephen Booth character, and the character that is closest to me is Skip, which is Adam Halpin's character. And it's funny because Will is kind of the idealist. He sees the world in this, beautiful light, and it's wonderful. Skip is a bit of a cynic, and he's a realist. He's sarcastic, and he's a realist, and he's very, I can talk about my character very lovingly because I enjoy myself. But that I just, he's very politically minded. He's very. Why don't you talk about Will? I'll just stop talking. Now.
Well, I don't enjoy myself, so I'll talk about myself negatively. No, but I think that the reason we did. These characters are a lot of us and our friends and the people that we know and care about, who are our age. And they're also sort of the younger versions of our parents and the authority figures that we respect and have come to know in our life, and for me, Will is sort of the parts of me that I would rather not admit are there.
Which is the same thing with Skip for me. There's this cynical side to myself that I kind of hate. I wish at times I could be as idealistic as Nick, and
I actually wish in a lot of ways that I could be as thoughtful and insightful as James is, and I think that in a way Will lies to himself about what the world is, and I think that's something that I've done in my life. And I think that whether James would like to admit it or not, I think Skip doesn't do the best job of listening always to his friends, and I think it's something that James has overcome, but is now a very fantastic listener.
I'll admit it. Well,
on the air.
Yeah, this has been like the longest podcast in the history of DC.
No, that's great.
Wonderful. All right, what advice would you both give young actors who are starting out in the business and are looking for work in the New York or DC community?
I would say the number one thing is nobody is holding your hand. Don't expect for anybody to guide you or show you the way. Don't expect to be discovered. As it is, you are a business person in this business, and you have to You really have to love this to do it. But I'd say the number one thing is that nobody's going to hold your hand.
I think that's true. I just was reading a quote recently from the director Werner Herzog. He was writing back to a man who wrote to him and said, I can't find my way. No one will watch my stuff. I don't have a camera. Why is it so hard? And why do people want to watch such commercial direct all the time? And I don't understand. How do I find my place as an artist? And he basically said exactly what James said. He was like, stop complaining and go do your work. And the thing is, it's not a sympathetic business, and it's not. I think that's a great thing in a way because it makes you understand the rewards of really giving yourself over to it. And it's a study of being a person, and whether you're writing or performing or directing or doing, painting the sets, it's such a magical world to be a part of that you have to be able to fully commit to, because no one is going to let you in just by virtue of the fact that you happen to like it, because so many people do. And it's been the thing that we're so lucky to have found Eric, because in a lot of cases people don't get their new musicals produced, but we stayed on him for 3.5 years until he finally gave in and said he would let us do it at his theater.
Right.
But it's a testament to him, and he's one of the few people who's accommodating in that way. But because there's not a lot of Eric Schaeffers out there, you have to really be tenacious and never, ever, ever give up if it's what you want.
Okay, well, let's end the podcast, and thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You're 23 years old, lots of glory days to come in your career.
Let's
Yes.
So please personally invite our listeners and the local theater community to come and see Glory Days, and tell them what kind of theater experience they will have.
I would say you're going to have the greatest theater experience of your entire life.
Your mind is going to get blown up.
No, it's I would say that we're making history here, and it's really cool. And it's not us. It's this theater, and it's Eric Schaeffer, and it's these boys who are putting on some of the most honest musical theater that I think is out there. And it's because we have great heroes like Stephen Sondheim and people who are writing theater that is about the human condition and the study of it. And these guys are proving that it's possible to do that even if you are under 30, and if the story is about just 4 people sitting together and talking.
And I think it's a piece that's going to hit close to home for any generation, anybody that's gone through losing a friend or making a choice in your life that is a hard decision at any juncture. And I think it's a lot of fun. I think Nick's score is rocking. I think the band in that Jesse Vargas and Nick Blaemire, Jesse Vargas, by the way, is our musical supervisor.
Superman.
Our musical Superman have put together is going to really be phenomenal and sound phenomenal. And James Kronzer's set is awesome.
As usual.
As usual. And Matt Rose doing the sound design, and I'm sure that's going to be great. But anyway.
And also I think that you are in for a night of fun along with everything else we're saying, because the show's really, it's just, I don't think I've laughed as hard as I have throughout this whole process. I mean, James's jokes are hilarious, and the way that they are delivered by these boys is just remarkable. And I do have to say, I mean, I guess maybe it is horn tooty a little bit, but I think that, what's happening here is really special, and I'm really, really proud to be a part of it.
Okay, so good luck with the show.
Thank you.
And I hope the higher-ups keep extending the run.
Yeah,